All right, it's Wednesday night. You know what that means. Coulrophobics Anonymous podcast. Week 10 in the books. Looking towards week 11. Should be a good one. Only 4 weeks left in the fantasy season. So things are getting serious. Starting with the waivers and trades. Pretty slow week as far as that's concerned, as I'm sure it will be towards as the year sort of progresses here. But Ariel was the big, spender. He went on a shopping spree, picked up Denarius Moore, Rex Grossman, and Matt Leinart for $33. I guess Ariel really wants to make sure that those Titanic deck chairs are just arranged just perfectly. In a playoff move, sort of a preparation move, Denenberg picks up Matt Flynn before Plotzker can get to him. I think it's a good strategy. Say hypothetically the Packers lose a game and have everything locked up by week 15 or 16. Those are our playoff weeks. Rodgers might be sitting, so that would be bad news for Plotzker. Denenberg picked up Flynn before he can get to it. All right. Looking at the power rankings, not much of a change this week, but we'll get more into the wild card watch, how the teams in the middle sort of separated themselves. But starting at the back, 12, Ariel Glicksberg. Ariel had an absolutely terrible weekend. He couldn't really build on his momentum. I know he beat Ted the previous week, which was nice, but Ariel got a good little double touchdown from Andy Dalton and A.J. Green. But really little else. Castle, Jeremy Maclin got hurt. Maclin is his new, he had just traded for him, and he not only did he not do anything for him this week, but he looks like he might be out this upcoming week. So tough break there. Number 11, Deutsch. Brian, that is. Brian went 0-2. He lost a close one to his brother. It looks like his acquisitions of Mark Sanchez and Antonio Brown have proved pretty fruitful, but, unfortunately, Aaron Hernandez didn't have a very big game. Tolbert was slow again, and Fred Jackson's kind of cooled off a little bit. Number 10, John Kraus. As he voiced himself several times this past week, Krause's season has kind of hit a spot of bad luck. Darren McFadden's injury, he's gotten some slow play from Welker. Fitzpatrick has really hit a wall. It sort of led him to 5 straight losses, which is the longest current losing streak in the league. I would say unless McFadden gets back in a hurry, and it doesn't look like he's going to be back this week, Krause's season is on the ropes. Number 9, Ben. Despite declaring his own season dead just a week ago, Ben dominated weekly high points this week and went 2-0. He's 3 wins out of the wild card, but with a respectable position in regards to total points, he's still, still alive. He's still in pretty good shape. Laurent Robinson was a very nice pickup for him. He's going to need a couple breaks. He's going to need some, and more on that later in the wild card watch. But, season's not over yet, Ben, even though you might want it to be. Number 8, I put myself. I went 2-0 this past weekend. Kind of breathed a small amount of life into what was once a dead season. I passed up Kraus for 3rd place in the Lane Bryant division. I believe it's the first time all year I've been out of 4th place. It looks like I finally have my lineup solidified. I think there's little argument that I have the best core of running backs in the league. I have DeMarco Murray, who's been incredible, Marshawn Lynch, Michael Turner, and Ray Rice. So that's 4 of the top 20 scoring backs. If I could just get solid performances from Cutler down the stretch and some of my deeper receivers, Crabtree, Cruz, I might have a chance. We'll see. Number 7, Justin. It might be time to start taking Justin seriously. Despite the fact that he has amassed the 2nd lowest point total in the league, his team just looks like shit on paper. He just keeps winning. He's going to need some luck. He's obviously at a serious tiebreaker disadvantage, considering his complete lack of total points. But really, he's a serious wildcard threat. I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. Number 6, Billy. This actually is the first picture that comes up when you Google Will Boris. I think it's pretty incredible. Billy, despite getting crushed by his brother this past week, Billy lucked into a .28 point victory this weekend. Adrian Peterson did just enough to put Billy over Kraus and really keep him alive in the wild card hunt. Billy's going to have to do it without Breeze and without Darren Sproles this weekend. They're on bye, and actually kind of interestingly faces the full spectrum of success in our league in that he plays Plotzker and he also plays Ariel. Number 5, Bootsy. I think this picture is hilarious. I was looking for an intro picture to start the podcast, and I've been looking for different funny clowns, so I typed retarded clown, and this was the first one that came up. So I thought that was pretty funny. Bootsy, it's pretty unfortunate to lose both of his games last week. Going 0-2 at this stage really opens the wild card race back up for some teams. But it's too bad Bootsy actually had a pretty good week, but still managed to lose both matchups. Jermichael Finley just couldn't do enough for him on Monday night. Greg Jennings caught a touchdown, so Oaks beat him. Bootsy kind of faces some injury concerns now. Willis McGahee looks like he's going to be out on Thursday. Matt Stafford has a broken finger. We'll see how that affects him down the stretch. And Matt Castle's injury really takes a chunk out of Dwayne Bowe. So, we'll see how things go for Bootsy. Ran into some bad luck this past weekend. Number 4, Oaks. Andrew Oaks. He took a tough loss to Plotzker. Went 1-1 on the weekend. Really that Rodgers to Nelson, that second touchdown was pretty miraculous. Arian Foster, Oaks' number 1 guy, remains in the conversation for best overall player in fantasy. He's really turned it on. And Chris Johnson is sort of finally coming around. If Oaks can keep getting games from Romo like he got this past Sunday, I would say he's definitely still in the driver's seat for the wild card. Denenberg, number 3. Rough weekend for him. He went 1-1. He only won because he happened to play Ariel's miserable crew. Denenberg put up the second lowest point total of the week. He got absolutely nothing from Frank Gore and Sidney Rice. He was lucky he got that monster game from Gronkowski. He needed all those points to beat Ariel. He would have lost to anyone but Ariel. So, Denenberg actually is in a lot of trouble this week. I'm sure he's realized that. I don't know if you guys have taken. I'm playing him, so it sticks out to me. If you take a look at his roster, Roethlisberger, Mike Wallace, Lance Moore, and Mark Ingram are all on bye, so you can't play them. Frank Gore and Michael Vick have injury problems. It looks like Gore is probably going to play, but he's hurt, so who knows how effective he's going to be. Michael Vick, I know just today they said he's doubtful to play. He missed practice. So if Vick doesn't play, Denenberg doesn't have any quarterbacks because Kevin Cobb is out. He just doesn't have much to do. Also, Doug Baldwin, Sidney Rice, both suffered concussions last week and might not play. Montario Hardesty still has that lingering injury. He won't play. Kevin Cobb is out. So, he's got Matt Flynn. Flynn, scored a rushing touchdown last week. If Vic doesn't play, Denenberg's going to have to start Flynn and just hope that the Packers blow out the Buccaneers so bad that Flynn gets in, which actually is, not even that bad of a plan. And at number 2, Ted Rifkin. Ted got back to his winning ways this past weekend. He put up the second highest point total of the week. Despite getting absolutely nothing from James Jones and Maurice Morris, Ted got big games from Tom Brady and from Ben Tate, and just a wild, absurd, crazy game from the Bears defense, which was awesome to see. And number 1, second week in a row, Jason Plotzker. Another 2-0 weekend for Plotz. This time it took a little extra work. Plotzker needed a bit of a Rodgers-Nelson miracle to put him over the top. However, it is not the worst loss that I've heard of, Oaks, and not the greatest win I've heard of either, Plotzker. A friend of mine, Corey Levin, he's Michael Perlstein's roommate. I don't know if you guys know him, is in a league. He was down by 60 points going into the Monday Night Football game. All he had left was Rodgers, Jordy Nelson, and Mason Crosby, and he ended up winning by less than a point. All the Rodgers-Nelson, everything Rodgers did got him back in it, and he was still down, and then they took out Rodgers, and he started freaking out. But then Flynn scored that rushing TD, and Mason Crosby hit that extra, that PAT on that touchdown that they didn't even really need, and he ended up winning by less than a point. So pretty bad beat if that makes you feel any better. All right, getting to the wild card watch. With only 4 weeks left, was able to actually sit down, do some real schedule analysis. Obviously things are impossible to predict with fantasy football. It's not the same as real football when you can actually tell if a team is going to beat another team. You just can't really tell in fantasy. But there are some trends that stick out. There are some scheduling things that stick out. So Oaks' loss to Plotzker this past weekend and Bootsy going 0-2, as I've touched on, really opened up the door for some of us wild card contenders. So here's how I see the odds. Start at the top, 11-9, Andrew Oaks. Of the 8 games that Oaks has left, he plays 4 teams with winning records. That might not sound like a lot, but he actually has the most difficult schedule remaining of any wildcard contender. He plays Ted twice. Having the most difficult schedule is one thing when Oaks probably still has the best team of anyone fighting for the wild card. So, I still see Oaks. I think he's the wild card favorite. He has a 1-win edge on the pack, and he also leads all contenders in total points. So we're all going to need to pass him up in the win column. He is going to be missing Arian Foster on a bye this week. So that's, if you have 4 weeks left and you're missing your stud for one of them, that's a pretty big deal. Still, put Oaks' wild card odds at 3-1. Next up, 10-10 Bootsy. Bootsy, he really stumbled this past weekend. He was the recipient of some bad luck. He went 0-2. He put up the 5th highest point total in the week. So looking at his schedule of his last 8 matchups, 3 of them are teams with winning records, which is pretty good. And he plays Justin twice as well. Justin, another team that's sort of fighting for the wild card. So that should be a pretty big deal. However, Bootsy is going to be without Richard Mendenhall this week. Mendenhall is out on a bye. So I'd say wild card odds for Bootsy 5-1. 10-10 Billy. Billy's narrow win over Kraus this past week was really a season saver for him. He only plays 3 teams down the stretch with winning records, but he does have to face Plotzker twice. So, one of these matchups, however, is in week 14, one of his matchups with Plotzker. Hypothetically, that might be a game in which Rodgers could sit, depending on what happens with the Packers season. So, it turns out without Rodgers, that might be a good matchup for Billy. He's going to need some help to succeed this weekend. However, he's going to be without Drew Brees and Darren Sproles and Reggie Wayne for what it's worth. Reggie Wayne obviously sucks, but Julio Jones just re-injured his hamstring. Could have been a nice fill-in for an injury there. About on par with Bootsy, same record, similar points. I'd say Billy, wildcard odds 5-1. Here's the real shocker. After the last 2 weeks in the wildcard watch, I've sort of been disrespecting him, but 10-10 Justin. I've mentioned it earlier in the podcast. I've been pretty hard on him, but it might be time to start taking him pretty seriously as a wild card threat. He needs to pass up everyone in the wins column. He's clearly way back in total points. He only has a paltry 1,853 points, which is significantly far behind the pack. But he only plays 2 teams with winning records in his last 8 games. He plays Bootsy twice as well. Ahmad Bradshaw's foot injury is probably it's a concern for him, but Justin seems to be getting the most out of what looks like a pretty mediocre team on paper. So I'd say wildcard odds. I think I had him at 50-1 last week. I'm bumping him way up to 7-1 this week. 8-12 Kraus. Kraus has lost 5 in a row. It's really put a damper on what was once a pretty promising wild card team. Darren McFadden's injury is really what set him back. But frankly, Kraus is alive for one reason. It's his remaining schedule. He only plays 2 winning teams down the stretch of his final 8 matchups, and he plays Deutsch twice. So if he could end his current losing streak, still has an outside shot. I'd say wild card odds 20-1. The Living Dead, Ben Boris, 8-12. Ben, he shot right back into the wild card conversation with his big 2-0 high points week. Similar to Kraus, his strong schedule is really what's keeping him in the thick of things. He only plays 2 winning teams out of his last 8, and he gets 2 shots at REL. So it's actually a pretty similar schedule there. Both Kraus and Ben, it looks like, are going to have a pretty big impact on the Clown Bowl as they play those 2 teams twice. But Ben loses some of his better players to buys this week. He's going to be without Matt Schaub and Noshan for the rest of the year. So I'd say wildcard odds 20-1. All right, and then myself at 9-1. I really saved myself going 2-0 this weekend and surpassing Kraus for 3rd in my division. But I am pretty far towards the back of the pack in total points. The only team I have more points in the wildcard hunt then is Justin. So, I face a pretty tough schedule as well. 4 of my last 8 matchups are against winning teams. And the only wildcard contenders that I can directly beat are Oaks and Justin. I'm done playing Billy, Ben, and Bootsy. So, the only thing productive I can say about my team is that I don't really have any real injury concerns so far, knock on wood, and all of my bye weeks are behind me. Still, with the total points problem, I give myself wildcard odds 25-1. All right, time to open up the old mailbag. Starting with a weekly contributor, Jason Plotzker, must be running out of stamps by now. Twinkle, twinkle, Mr. Bauer, I have 2 questions today. 1, Jordy Nelson and Wes Welker are basically the same player. Tiny white slot guys that would be nothing without their stud quarterback. Who, however, has more keeper value for the next year and the year after, considering their draft prices and production this year. And, number 2, with our league scoring, who has had the best fantasy year ever for a quarterback? Is Aaron Rodgers on pace to break that record? Can he? Keep on twinkling, Jason Plotzker. Well, Plotzker, I disagree with your first point, actually. Welker and Nelson, yes, they're both white, and yes, they're both good, but I think their playing styles are pretty different. Welker, he's known for his aptitude and going across the middle, being kind of a tough guy. I mean, he also, that being said, does go off for some deeper plays, but it's mostly, quick slants that he takes the distance. Nelson is kind of a field stretcher. He's sort of always catching deep balls. So I think they're a little bit different from each other, but, they're both very good, and they both would suck without the presence of their baller quarterback. So, continuing your trend of asking questions to which you already know the answer to, I have to say that Jordy Nelson is clearly the better keeper. He was drafted for $0, which means he'll be very cheap for the next 2 years, and is a key member of the best offense in the league. It looks like Donald Driver might retire, so Nelson's basically their number 2 already, but he'll be cemented as their number 2 next year. Welker, obviously is very good as well, but the clock is kind of ticking on him. It's also kind of ticking on Brady physically as well. Who knows if they can keep it up for another year, another 2 years. So, in addition, Welker was drafted for $13. So is he really worth $23, $28? So Nelson is the answer. To address your second point, there have been, many fantastic quarterback seasons since we've been playing fantasy football. Peyton Manning in 2004 passed for over 4,500 yards. He had 49 touchdowns. Tom Brady in 2007, of course, over 4,800 yards, had 50 touchdowns. And who could forget Jamarcus Russell's historic 2009 campaign, 1,200 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Aaron Rodgers is on pace to tie Brady's 50 touchdown mark. He's on pace to break Marino's yardage mark. So, yes, Plotzker, the guys on your team are good. Congratulations. Great loaded question. Obviously, Rodgers is very good. Next question, or next email, coming from Brian Deutsch. Mr. Bauer, 1, it was exposed yesterday that my sole bet of the weekend was on Andrew Denenberg losing his bets with Plotzker. Please discuss the moral dilemma, if you see any, in betting against a friend. 2, after seeing all of these Reggie Bush Pizza Hut commercials, I got to thinking, what NFL player would I want most in our league? For baseball, the answer would clearly be Nick Swisher. I feel football is tougher, though. My initial reaction is Matt Jones. Who would be your nominees? 3, feel free to save this one for another time, but can we get a player comparison for each of our league members? And Deutsch's examples are Kraus as Jay Cutler. He's always bitching about something. Ben as Matt Jones, and he puts in parentheses for obvious reasons. And then Oaks as Bill Belichick, an evil genius. What else do you have? Thanks, Brian. I think these are good questions. To address your first point, I'd say there's certainly no moral quandary in betting against your friends. You might feel bad about it, but not when you're counting that sweet cash. So I don't know, what's that old adage? Money always buys you happiness or something. Yeah, that's how it goes. So don't worry about it. Continue to bet. Second part, I find those Reggie Bush Pizza Hut commercials pretty funny. There's a high number of players in the league that I would trade straight up for an XL meat lovers. A few names that come to mind when I think of guys, NFL players I'd want in our league. Matt Jones obviously has the hookup, so he'd be pretty fun. Johnny Jolly for the same reason. Maurice Jones-Drew would be fun. He actually knows what he's doing when it comes to fantasy football. But for me, the obvious choice would have to be Vince Wilfork. Not only could he introduce us to Nevin Shapiro, which would be nice for our league celebrations, but he'd make the greatest clown of all time. We'd have to sew like 4 clown costumes together just to fit on him. So I think it'd be great to have Vince Wilfork. Furthermore, can you envision a party at Montana, Brandwine and Vince Wilfork spending some quality time together? I think it'd be fantastic. All right, and to address your final point, spend some time considering some league player comparisons. I do like your 3. I came up with the following. For you, Deutsch, I think Colt McCoy. It's a guy you acquired earlier in the year. No one questions Colt's effort, but the results just aren't there. For Ariel, I'd say Lenny Friedman, offensive tackle for the Browns. Any explanation needed really here? I don't think so. For Justin, I'd say Amobi Okoye because he was drafted when he was 19 years old, youngest player in league history. Denenberg, I'd say Sean Merriman. He's constantly bitching about injuries. No one really wants to hear it. He likes to smash Asians, and he's also very hot and cold in his performance. Billy, I'd say Tim Hasselbeck, brother of a guy in the league, not quite as good. Bootsy, I would say Nate Newton. Besides the obvious physical resemblance, these two, they share an affinity for a certain plant. Ted, I'd say Andy Reid. Always starts hot, finishes cold, gets tripped up on little things that he doesn't quite see coming, and both of them love bacon. For myself, I'd say Donovan McNabb, very outspoken, viewed as a league personality, but just manages to skate by on the most minimal amount of effort required and past successes. And then for Plotzker, finally, and this is my favorite one, I see Plotzker as Paul Hornig. In addition to his well-known love for hookers, Hornig was actually suspended from football in 1963 for betting on his own games. And this was from his Wikipedia page. Hornig once said, "Never get married in the morning. You never know who you might meet that night." So hope you like the league comparisons. We'll see how things shake out this weekend. It could be big starting tomorrow with Thursday Night Football. Good luck this weekend.